Okay, live stream is rolling. Looks good. Sergeants, at this time, please start recordings.
The computer rolling.
And recording to the cloud are underway. Good morning and welcome to today's remote New York City Council hearing for the Committee on Cultural Affairs, Libraries, and Intergroup Relations. At this time, would all panelists please turn on the video for verification purposes? And to minimize any disruptions, please place all electronic devices to vibrate or silent mode. If you'd like to submit testimony, please send via email to testimony@council.nyc.gov. Again, that is testimony@council.nyc.gov. Thank you for your cooperation. Chair Osei, we are ready to begin.
Good morning, everyone. I am Councilmember Chi Osei, Chair of the New York City Council's Committee on Cultural Affairs, Libraries, and International Intergroup Relations. Thank you for joining us this morning for this important hearing on oversight, using New York City libraries to help overcome BIPOC youth learning losses due to COVID-19. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge my colleagues and members of the Committee on Cultural Affairs, Libraries, and International Intergroup Relations who have joined us so far today. Good morning to Councilmembers Ung, Councilmember Moya, Councilmember Hudson, Councilmember Joseph, Councilmember Dinowitz, and Deputy Speaker Ayala. Today, we're here to learn about what the New York City Public Libraries are doing to help reverse the learning losses experienced by students during the pandemic, with a particular emphasis on finding out what is being done to support Black, Indigenous, and young people of color, and understand how the Council may better support these efforts. Additionally, the committee will hear resolution number 57, sponsored by Deputy Speaker Diana Ayala, which calls upon Congress to pass and the President to sign the Puerto Rico Self-Determination Act of 2021, or HR 2070. Arguably, one of the most distressing and critical disruptions of the COVID-19 pandemic has been experienced within our academic communities. COVID-19 sidelined the process of routine learning protocols and has, at every stage, posed barriers and challenges to the educational development of the city's 1.1 million students who live and attend school in New York City. Then, the New York City school system was called upon to pivot from a full-time, in-person classroom environment to an all-remote virtual learning model in March of 2020. It comes as no surprise that the city's three library systems comprised of the New York Public Library, the Queens Public Library, and the Brooklyn Public Library quickly sprang into action. Like public schools, the libraries quickly transitioned to an all-virtual programming environment. In doing so, they began the critical task of bridging the educational and informational divide for students in New York City. Not only did the libraries create and upload educational content, they also introduced free Wi-Fi and laptop loan programs to enable students to continue learning from home. While schools did begin to slowly transition back into brick and mortar classrooms, and despite valiant efforts by all the stakeholders, challenges have continued to daunt students, parents, and educators, and learning losses have accumulated. Today, education advocates and experts have expressed deep concern about the aggregate learning losses suffered by students and the response from the city in meeting and addressing this challenge. Research suggests that the widespread and rapid switch to remote schooling will have negative long-term academic consequences and predict what they term to be a COVID-19 slide, in which students showed patterns of academic setbacks throughout the extended closure, like what is typically seen in lapsed learning habits and after summer vacation. Studies also show students from marginalized backgrounds tend to experience more severe learning losses than their counterparts, and now researchers are concerned that low-income students, students with disabilities, and other at-risk populations will fall even further behind their peers, noting that the number of students who end up needing to repeat at least one grade could rise, due in large part to the disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2021, approximately 14,800 New York City school children opted to become homeschooled. This number reflects an 88% increase in homeschooling since the pandemic began, with the largest increases occurring in districts with a higher share of low-income students. While reasons for this varied by family, the decision to continue homeschooling for many parents and caretakers who are able to work remotely and educate their children at home stems from seeing firsthand the challenges their children face in a virtual environment. especially when some parents witnessed what some described as a curriculum that wasn't culturally responsive. In fact, many parents who had been longtime skeptics of their children's education grew concerned by what they deemed anti-Blackness and bias in the curriculum, and were reportedly shocked to overhear their children's online classrooms discussions that confirmed their suspicions, such as routinely omitted references to Black history, the Black Lives Matter movement, and LGBTQ affirming resources. While homeschooling only accounts for 1.5% of the city's students, and is difficult for many families to do, the numbers are significant. The number of homeschool students in the sixth highest poverty district increased 119%, while homeschool students in the six lowest poverty districts increased 79% since the onset of the pandemics. It's important to remember that many parents and caregivers who worked outside the home were not always available to provide regular educational tutoring and supports to children left to learn and navigate a new and challenging virtual school environment. Finally, the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, warned in March we will mark 2 years of COVID-19 related disruptions to global education. Quite simply, we are looking at a nearly insurmountable scale of loss to children's schooling. While the disruptions to learning must end, just reopening schools is not enough. Students need intensive support to recover lost education. Schools must also go beyond places to learning to rebuild children's mental and physical health, social development, and nutrition. Today, we look forward to hearing from 3 libraries about their commitment to continue to provide vital and necessary intensive supports UNICEF referenced to help our students regain lost ground due to the pandemic. Libraries continue to be a hub of critical resources that ensure students are able to keep up and stay on track, and most importantly, continue to move forward with their educational goals. Our libraries have played a critical role in aiding students in marginalized communities, and it is critical to ensure sufficient funding for libraries to continue to do this important work. We look forward to learning about the diverse and creative programming that will address their needs, and look forward to hearing from the advocates and other interested stakeholders. I would also like to thank the community members, advocates, library staff, and who have joined us today. We are grateful for your partnership and look forward to learning how we can better support you. Before I turn to our moderator to read the oath, I would like to thank my staff, my legislative and budget director, May Vucherpong-Batana, my chief of staff, Naomi Hopkins, as well as our committee staff, Brenda McKitty, Committee Counsel, Christy Dwyer, our Legislative Policy Analyst, and Alia Ali, Finance Unit Head. And I would also like to acknowledge Councilmember Lewis, who is also here. Finally, before we begin with the oversight portion of today's hearing, I would like to give my colleagues, Deputy Speaker Ayala, an opportunity to give remarks on her resolution number 57, which the committee will also be hearing today.
Good morning and thank you. I'd like to thank Chair Osei for allowing us to hear Resolution 57 today. Resolution 57 calls on Congress to pass and the President to sign the Puerto Rico Self-Determination Act of 2021, HR 27, originally introduced 2020 HR 8113, co-sponsored by Congresswoman Nydia Velasquez and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. HR 2070 recognizes the right of the people of Puerto Rico to call a status convention through which the people would exercise their natural right to self-determination and to establish a mechanism for congressional consideration of such decision. This bill establishes a process for the people of Puerto Rico to vote on the political status of the territory. For too long, Puerto Ricans have been exposed to policies that were not in the best interest of their well-being. The realities of this neglect has affected every aspect of Puerto Rican lives, economically, politically, and environmentally. The Self-Determination Act would allow Puerto Ricans the option to chart a course to change the destructive effects of colonization and allow for new leadership to oversee the process of decolonization. Puerto Rico faces a myriad of challenges: economic devastation, government mismanagement, and are still dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Maria. Add to this the agony of dealing with the current pandemic, which has caused additional loss of life and distress to many families. Inadequate assistance from the federal government further exacerbates the fiscal crisis and limits the tools that it has to restore a healthy economy. The SCOTUS ruling that came down last week is a slap in the face to so many on the island. It is unconscionable, discriminatory, and unconstitutional to give benefits to some US citizens and not to others. Just because some choose to live the island as their home, they are being penalized by taking away benefits that would otherwise have them thrive. Yet again, with this decision, the Puerto Rican people are at the mercy of a government that doesn't adequately represent them in Congress and can't depend on Congress to fight for and recognize their rights. The path to a healthy and thriving economy should start with the voices of its residents. Now is the time to politically empower Puerto Ricans for their voices to be heard and to be granted the opportunity to decide their path and vision for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm now going to turn it over to the moderator, our committee counsel, Brenda, to go over some procedural items. And I would also like to acknowledge Councilmember Farias.
Thank you so much, Chair. Good morning. My name is Brenda McKinney. I'm counsel to the Committee on Cultural Affairs, Libraries, and International Intergroup Relations for the New York City Council. Before we begin, I'd like to start with some housekeeping items and remind everyone that you will be on mute until called on to testify, when you will be unmuted by the host. A box will pop up and please click it. I will be calling on panelists to testify today. Please listen for your name to be called on, and I will periodically be announcing who the next panelist will be. For everyone testifying today, please note that there may be seconds of delay before you are unmuted, and we thank you for your patience. All hearing participants should submit written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov. The council will also accept written testimony up to 72 hours after the hearing. At today's hearing, the first panelist to give testimony will be representatives from the libraries, followed by council member questions. At present, we do not have any members of the public registered to testify, but we will move to the public after the libraries if we receive registrants during the hearing. Council members who have questions for a particular panelist should use the raise hand function in Zoom, and I will call on you after the panelist has completed their testimony. We will have one round of council member questions today. While we do not need to swear in the libraries today, we will ask that the libraries testify in the following order. First, the Brooklyn Public Library, followed by the New York Public Library, and finally, the Queens Public Library. I will also state the names of today's witnesses for the record, but again, we will not be reading the oath. We have President Tony Marks, President of the New York Public Library, Linda Johnson, President and CEO of the Brooklyn Public Library, Nick Buren, Chief Librarian of the Queens Public Library, Giselle Dixon, Vice President of the New York NYPL, New York Public Library Branch Services and Programs, and Kevin Kelly, the Brooklyn Public Library Coordinator of School Age Services. So thank you, President Johnson. You may begin your testimony when ready. From Brooklyn.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair Osei and members of the committee. I'm Linda Johnson, President and CEO of Brooklyn Public Library, and I appreciate the opportunity to share how the library worked to minimize the pandemic's disruption on the lives of BIPOC youth over the past 2 years. Even as we were forced to close our doors for the first time in our 125-year history, Brooklyn Public Library staff swiftly pivoted to offer as much support as possible to youth and their families, including those grappling with remote schooling. While I'm confident that our efforts help blunt the impact of the pandemic for many families, there is, of course, much more work to be done. We believe that our work to keep BIPOC youth connected to the library and engaged in our programs is addressing learning loss. The rapid disruption of the school routine had a damaging impact on the city's children, particularly those with the least resources, and our staff made it their priority to minimize interruption in services for all patrons, learners, and especially youth and families. Overnight, we transitioned to virtual programming. We leveraged our means to ensure a robust digital platform, hosted 6 New York City learning labs in our branches, created at-home kits to maintain connections with our patrons, and provided books and resources to support their growth and enrich their learning outside of the classroom. As the largest provider of free Wi-Fi in Brooklyn, we are keenly aware of the 800,000 plus Brooklynites who lack digital access and have worked over the years to help bridge the digital divide. While our branches offer free internet access, technology, and classes, the pandemic amplified disparities in underserved communities. As the world went virtual, those who needed us most became even further removed. So we placed signal boosters on the rooftops of our buildings to extend our internet signal 300 feet in every direction, even into nearby homes and businesses. Our internet is available to patrons 24 hours a day, whether they are inside our libraries or outside. Additionally, we published a guide to understanding the new FCC emergency broadband benefit. Our librarians have been helping families sign up for the subsidy to receive low-cost broadband services. Libraries are, of course, no strangers to learning loss. Every summer, we launch summer reading, intended to minimize learning loss while school is out for summer vacation, also known as Summer Slide. Our approach is to meet children and families where they are. Librarians emphasize finding the joy in reading and develop fun activities, games, specialized book lists, and craft projects to keep children connected to literacy. The impact of remote schooling over the pandemic surely intensified Summer Slide. While the library had to offer summer reading virtually, we supplemented with thousands of grab-and-go kits, take-home STEM-based arts and crafts, creative games, and book giveaways. At-home kits were particularly successful as many children did not have books or materials at home, and caregivers were starving for children's activities. This year, summer reading at Brooklyn Public Library kicks off on June 4th, welcoming people back to the library with exciting events and activities at all of our branches as we jointly celebrate summer reading and our 125th anniversary year. An early solution to help struggling students was boosting our online resources, offering free personalized help in math, reading, writing, and science, a 24/7 writing lab, and practice tests, including SAT preparation. We continue to offer an extensive list of free interactive learning tools meant to support students and educators. In addition, Brooklyn Public Library has run a homework help program for years with the assistance of trained volunteers. Homework helpers tutor elementary and middle school children individually or in small groups, while also teaching them to use the library's directories, indexes, web-based tech, and reference materials. And with the East New York Reads Initiative, a collaboration of 11 organizations in East New York, East Harlem, and South Jamaica, we are partnering with educators to offer homework help sessions for all students from kindergarten through 5th grade at the Arlington, Cypress Hills, and New Lots libraries. One of the most impactful ways we increased access and equity for our patrons was the permanent elimination of late fines last fall, along with Queens and New York public libraries. In Brooklyn, this amounted to clearing late fines and related fees for over 50,000 children and teens. Removing this barrier, which impacts lower resourced communities that need us most, means no one will be prevented from using their library because of unpaid late fines. If their books are returned, patrons will always be able to check out more. Additionally, we took steps to further increase the diversity of books in our collection, created specific anti-racist book lists and programs, prioritizing books and displays that are more reflective of our children, and revamped our Storytime collection to better reflect the diversity of our patrons and ensure that BIPOC youth see themselves represented in our materials. For children under the age of 5, we continue to focus on school readiness with our Ready Set Kindergarten program in English and Spanish. Families enjoy stories and activities designed to encourage the development of early learning practices and the social emotional skills that help young children adjust to their first classroom environment. Playing, singing, and having reading materials at home is critical to helping families of young children with early literacy. Thanks to the Council's funding of the City's First Readers Initiative, in the first half of fiscal year 2022 alone, Brooklyn Public Library engaged young children and their families in 166 virtual storytime sessions with more than 7,600 views. We held over 100 in-person outdoor literacy programs with an attendance of 4,000. In addition to distributing learn-at-home kits and play recipe cards and hosting educator and parent and caregiver workshops on a host of early literacy topics. Since the onset of the pandemic, our children's librarians have held thousands of virtual story times in more than a dozen languages, often attracting more participants than in-person story time could ever fit in a single branch. Brooklyn's youngest patrons were not alone in experiencing hardship and learning loss. Young adults, particularly BIPOC youth, suffered the impact of being isolated from their friends and school community, missing milestones, processing trauma and grief, and of course, the senseless murder of George Floyd. Over the pandemic, through a host of internships and volunteer opportunities, teens stayed connected with their library. Today's teens, tomorrow's techies, students, 85% of whom are BIPOC, signed up to learn new computer skills through a 2-week technology institute, after which they put those skills to work helping patrons use library technology. This beloved program is now in its 17th year. Collaboration is strong between this cohort and young adults in Librarians of Tomorrow, a hands-on internship program for high school students with an interest in library careers. Story Teen, an internship made possible through the city's First Readers Initiative, engages high school students with an interest in literacy and early childhood education. Participants learn to assist in a variety of children's programs, including offering story time. Young adults in the current cohort speak a variety of languages, including Arabic, Bengali, English, French, Hindi, Korean, Mandarin, Punjabi, Russian, Spanish, Urdu, and Yoruba, adding a beautiful diversity to our story time offerings. In addition to virtual programming, we are equally committed to better serving young adults in our physical spaces. We proudly host a Best Buy Teen Tech Center at the Kings Highway Library. It is an interactive learning space featuring workstations, tech equipment, collaboration areas, and a recording studio. Teens are encouraged to use the space to produce music, animations, robotic constructions, and more. A growing number of our branch libraries are outfitted with teen-friendly spaces, including comfortable furniture, flexible layouts, and charging stations. And over the next few years, a third of our branches will undergo complete renovations with new teen spaces separate and apart from the children's area. During the community engagement sessions held for these renovations, we asked teens directly what they want in their libraries, and their comments will inform the design of these new spaces. The last few years have not been easy, particularly for BIPOC youth. While it is impossible to know how deeply the pandemic will impact our children over the long term, we know that our library staff worked tirelessly to offer support and meaningful opportunities to stay connected to literacy and learning. Librarians are as important now as they have ever been. It is only with your support that we can remain strong for the millions of people who depend on us every day. Thank you for your partnership and for taking time to explore this important issue.
Thank you so much, President Johnson. We'll now move to President Marks from the New York Public Library.
Thank you, Brenda, and I hope you all can hear me. Good morning, everyone. I'm Tony Marks, the president of the New York Public Library, and I'm proud to be joined today by Giselle Dixon, a great veteran of the library system, newly recognized as our vice president for branch programs and services system-wide. I want to thank, of course, the City Council Speaker Adams, Chair Osei, and the members of the committee for the opportunity to testify, and for all you have done to help lead us and will lead us through these challenging days. We know that these days have been so particularly pointedly challenged on our kids and teens who've disproportionately impacted by the pandemic and by the widening learning gaps that Linda's already eloquently talked about, that built upon the existing disproportions and inequalities of BIPOC youth and their experiences of education and life in New York more generally. And so this is really focused in on this, the tragic consequences of structural racism and inequality, and then add the pandemic, really focused in on BIPOC youth, and we need to respond as we have been, building upon what we've done in the past and our expertise, particularly our amazing staff. I'm going to summarize the testimony, which you have in front of you. I'm also going to rearrange it a little bit just to give a sense of what a student, a teen's experience is in the system and what we have and are and will be offering. So of course, the initial funnel for all of these education programs starts with early learning and with our story times. I think across the city, we were getting before the pandemic about 2 million visits to those story times, about 1.5 million of those at the New York Public. Obviously pivoted to digital, now rebuilding in actual. The other piece that we're adding to this is the research library. We have the most used research library on the planet. We have about 60 million items. And this has generally been a place, this building, where people have just come at the high end of sort of research and, more senior scholars. It's time to liberate the research library and put it to use for the community, which is what it was designed for. It's why it's a public library. And to bring the library to all of our kids and teens through the schools and elsewhere. So we've created a new center for educators in schools, the dedication of which is to take our primary resources and make them the exciting centerpiece of school plans, curriculum plans, et cetera, digitally as well as physically, using our new treasures exhibit, making those the sort of the headliners, if you will, the bait, if you will, to get folks in, but also working with the Schomburg's curriculum project and others for lesson plans. We've got at the Schomburg unit themes around slavery and abolition, Black power and Black women's stories, all the way to the history of playgrounds in our students and patrons' actual neighborhoods. That also, of course, only works if we have collections, as Linda also mentioned, that reflect the interests of our patrons and the diversity of New York. We, of course, continue to make significant investments in our collections overall. In the last 2 years, we've invested $3.3 million in books, $345,000 in read-alongs, $365,000 in world language materials, $1.9 million in ebooks, because during the pandemic, we lent 11 million ebooks to keep our circulation up and as a lifeline to New Yorkers. We also provide subscriptions to electronic resources. So many of these are specific and targeted and particularly useful for our BIPOC communities. But we also do local initiatives. So Aguilar and our Harlem branches are creating local community collections, and those projects continue. We know after the pandemic, we need to refresh our collections in high need neighborhoods. And we are establishing completely new collections in our 5 completely being restored or renovated Carnegie libraries, all in high need neighborhoods, Hunts Point, Melrose, Port Richmond, 125th Street, and Fort Washington. We also know that that there's a huge gap in poor students, BIPOC students simply not having their own libraries at home, in addition to we, of course, using our libraries, borrowing. But kids need to have those libraries at home, and they need to represent their interests and their own diversity. So we're going to distribute this summer 500,000 diverse books for students in these neighborhoods to develop their own at-home libraries that we can then add borrowed books to. Linda's already mentioned our eliminating late fines in 2021. That meant for us 113,000 library cards, which were stupidly blocked for a policy that didn't work and didn't make sense. And we've seen immediate increases in our visits and our circulation. So story time, early literacy, the Center for Educators and Students, our collections, ending fines, all designed to encourage students and build on, the intake of those students. Then as the students get older, they shift to our after-school program, which we have a new model for that we started in fall 21. It's a drop-in after-school program in 20 of our branches in the historically marginalized communities, so that those students get the kind of after-school offerings that students of more privilege and at fancier schools or different schools have as a part of their regular offerings. So we need to level that playing field. We recruited a diverse set of tutors. These are everything from education students to retired teachers, lead tutors with 17 languages represented among them. And they've been focusing on STEM programs, which of course excite the students and bring them in. We provide snacks because heartbreakingly, our students are coming to these programs hungry. I mean, in New York City in 2022, that's, makes your head explode. We have additional tutoring support. We've hired teen reading ambassadors. So in addition to the professional tutors, we hire high school students, we pay them, we train them in literacy so that they can teach the younger students. But we all know that when you teach, you also learn. So the teaching is going both ways in this, and it's first jobs for these students, which is sets them on the course for workforce. So all of the attendees of these programs are really low socioeconomic BIPOC students. And I'll just say from personal experience, going to the branches as we've reopened, these after-school programs are taking off. They've taken over the children's floors. They're full of life. Everybody's rolling up their sleeves. Giselle's team is just is doing just amazing work. Then the summer comes. We worry about the summer slide, of course. So we've got free events, take-home activities, all kinds of resources, as well as a 6-week STEM. Sorry, can you all still see me? Apologies. A 6-week STEM summer cruise, special events featuring BIPOC authors and illustrators. Again, book giveaways, kits. It just continues. We have a system-wide NYPL teen magazine so that students can show off what they've done. All of that leads eventually to our teen centers. And I want to sort of focus here. We are making a firm commitment to create new teen centers across our system. To provide as Linda described them, up-to-date technologies, spaces to gather and socialize, academic and socio-emotional support, digital literacy. We've created a flagship here at our new Stavros Niarchos Foundation Library. And on any weekday afternoon, it is just packed. And these students are coming from all over the city. So we have to get these resources out into the communities. We'll be opening additional teen centers this summer in Wakefield, Woodstock, Van Cortlandt, Grand Concourse, County Cullen, Bloomingdale, and West Brighton and Staten Island, all, of course, underserved neighborhoods. And then finally, after you've come together for this culmination of the Teen Center, which, by the way, we also hope will add civic engagement activities within the STEM activities, and I'm sure we'll all be talking about that. Then we need, having brought the students in, then we need to help them figure out what their path out is. And that means college as well as career pathway initiatives, helping students understand the complexity, and I know this well because I came from post-secondary education, how to apply for college, how that's changed under COVID-19. We provide one-on-one counseling, information sessions. We'll assist as well, not just for getting into college, but looking for jobs. We have a whole floor for that here at the Niarchos Library, and again, creating satellites. And we'll assist teens with resumes and cover letters. You can come look for a job. We'll help you start a job. We have an intensive college and career access network working on ACT and SAT prep, filling out financial aid forms. And all of this, I can give you the numbers, is BIPOC students and BIPOC participants. Let me just conclude to say simply, sorry, not so simply, I need to find the right page. There is so much to do. That is why we are all here. And the libraries, I think it's clear, and Queens is about to reiterate, that we can and are doing more and ready to do even more than that. We see this programmatic focus as a fundamentally new partnership with the city for a new model of what the libraries can be. Here at the New York Public, we spent $100 million of private funds to work over the last decade to create these education programs that now give us the foundation on which we can build and really have an impact in these communities. That's changed the model of what a branch library means. You know, Giselle and her team have led us to say, we can't just be passive space, as essential as that is in these neighborhoods. We have to be proactive education spaces, and we need to focus in on the BIPOC students whose needs are the strongest in this city at this juncture. We're ready. We are clearly ready to step up. We are stepping up. We need the city to join us in the partnership of support for these education programs so that they can not only be sustained, again, with partnerships with private as well, but sustained as well as grown at this moment in history, which is why we're all gathering this morning. Thank you again, Mr. Chair, in particular.
Thank you so much, President Marks. Finally, we will hear from the Queens Public Library and Chief Librarian Nick Buren. Mr. Buren, when you're ready.
Thank you, Brenda. Good morning. I am Nick Buren, Chief Librarian and Senior Vice President at the Queens Public Library. And on behalf of our library and our President and CEO, Dennis Walcott, it is a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Chair Osei and the members of this esteemed committee for the opportunity to speak with you today on this important subject. The COVID-19 pandemic uprooted normal life for all of New Yorkers, and it is clear that the city's most vulnerable populations experienced the worst of the impact. Queens, the most diverse borough in the country, was the epicenter of the nation's outbreak. Communities were devastated, leaving many people confronting the heartbreaking loss of family members, friends, colleagues, and neighbors. Throughout the entire ordeal, QPL remained committed to serving the communities of Queens and helping the city recover and rebuild. This includes remaining a reliable resource and community center for our younger library users so that they can overcome the obstacles the pandemic has caused in their lives. 20% of the population of Queens is 18 years old and younger, with over 76% identifying as non-white. When we examine the age range of all QPL cardholders, we find that approximately 275,000 customers, or 19% of our cardholders, are under 18 years old. It was essential for the library to move quickly when the New York City Department of Education announced schools were moving to remote classes to slow the spread of COVID-19 in March of 2020. Despite the unprecedented disruption into our daily lives, QPL swiftly transitioned from providing in-person services to providing virtual programming and services, expanding our digital collection, and secured additional education and personal enrichment resources for our customers. In addition, our specialized programs and services geared towards our younger audiences also transitioned into the digital world. QPL developed the STACS program, which is a free enrichment program for children in grades K through 5 to enhance a children's learning experiences through age-appropriate activities in a safe and welcoming environment. The program is designed to help them build their social, emotional, and academic skills. And prior to the pandemic, STACS was operating in 13 enrichment sites and 11 homework centers in our library network. Our amazing staff was able to modify the program to fit in a virtual mode, allowing any student to attend, no matter their location, and offering STEM workshops, art programs, and more. This past year, staff interacted with students on a variety of activities, including a writing Who Am I booklet, an important women from history, creating coin spinning and mini volcanoes, and the Cat in the Hat STEM Challenge on National Dr. Seuss Day. And according to our voluntary provided data, our STACS 2021 summer session served almost 1,100 students, of which 82% of those participants identified as non-white, while our fall sessions had similar percentage of non-white youth as well. QPL has long prioritized minimizing learning losses that students experience during the summer months, as you've heard often referred to as the summer slide. Our summer reading program not only encouraged students to read through the summer, but also aims to engage students through special programming. In honor of our 125th anniversary, we challenged readers to dedicate 125 minutes per week of reading. We offered virtual programming covering a diverse spectrum of interests, such as multi-week series on exploration and cartooning, teen programming, photograph, and design, and storytelling. Our staff curated specialized book lists for students in elementary school through high school. And even the pandemic could not stop the enthusiasm of our youth, inspiring the theme, Reading Takes You Everywhere. Our summer reading program remained popular with nearly 15,000 participants in over 2,200 program sessions and a circulation of over 266,000 this past summer. When the pandemic began, QPL understood the needs of acquiring extra tutoring and e-learning resources for our students. As a result, QPL began to offer BrainFuse, one of the nation's leading online tutoring providers, to provide access to free homework help, including live, online tutoring, and test prep in a wide range of subjects for K through 12 students and adult learners. In fiscal year 2021, QPL users accessed BrainFuse for over 3,500 sessions, with more than 3,000 being live help sessions and nearly 6,000 database visits. In fiscal year 2021, QPL virtually hosted more than 3,800 children's programmings, serving over 37,000 children. Programs specifically for teenagers yielded more than 8,300 teens participating in over 900 virtual programs. For our high school students who are exploring their options for the next phase of their educational journey, we scheduled 40 programs with an overall attendance of 770 students. College readiness workshops focused on an array of vital topics such as time management and study skills, understanding the FAFSA application process, financial literacy, and helping students to understand which college might be right for them. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted many inadequacies, one of the most alarming being the lack of broadband access in households across New York City, particularly in Queens. Many homes in our borough do not have access they need for school children to complete their homework assignments and to connect with their cohort. Working to narrow the digital divide, QPL loaned 475 mobile hotspots to students in 2020 through our ongoing collaboration with the DOE. In October of 2021, QPL announced an initiative funded by Sterling National Bank, National Grid, and the Thomas and Jean L. Mezzi Private Foundation to provide over 250 hotspots and laptops for loan to the public at the Left Rock City, South Jamaica, Astoria, and Long Island City libraries. We have continued to prioritize securing hotspots for our customers, and currently we have over 2,200 hotspots to lend, which are available at 25 locations throughout the borough. However, we know we need more. As we begin reintroducing in-person programming and slowly return to a new kind of normal, we are refocusing on how best to serve our younger customers. In January, our Far Rockaway Teen Library, located where 26% of the community is under 18 and 65% identify as non-white, reopened for the first time since March of 2020. The library provides teens in Far Rockaway with dedicated space that they can call their own, helping them to explore their interests and learn outside of their classroom with their peers and trusted adults. It aims to stimulate creative thinking, encourage civic engagement, and with the guidance of youth counselors and teen librarians, help teens explore their school and career options. The center has a dedicated homework space and computer area with free printing. The teen library will continue to provide robust virtual programming, including Youth Justice Court, workshops on subjects ranging from technology, entrepreneurship, and financial literacy to creative arts and health and wellness, college readiness, and job search resources, as well as a book club. It also has grab-and-go kits containing items such as craft supplies, bookmarks, and writing journals to engage teens in projects outside the library. As the teen library welcomes back its customers, they're increasing their unique and creative programming. With support from the Queens District Attorney's Office, the teens have started their own podcast, interviewing celebrities, including Funkmaster Flex. The podcast requires them to hone their skills through researching and compiling information and questions, public speaking, editing content, and working collaboratively as a team. Since its reopening earlier this year, the library has had over 6,100 visits. Our public service staff are at the forefront of helping our children and teens at our 66 locations. The temporary closure of schools affects how students socialize, complete tasks, and focus their energies. At the Cambria Heights Library Teen Center, staff found the best mode of support to help their teens was helping them prioritize their goals, whether it is assisting in researching higher education options or offering consistency and support while completing assignments. Additionally, Cambria Heights has been encouraging teens to read by updating collections with materials that speak with the interests and creating programs based on them. Throughout the academic year, the Long Island City Library infused trauma-informed principles into their programs for school-age students, which includes reinforcing the fact that they belong to a safe and trusting environment where they can collaborate with peers and interact with mentors. Long Island City hosted an array of unique programming, such as Code and Create, Ask Taisha, which is a several-week class where young adults work in teams to develop virtual personal assistant, Grow with Google, and Environmental Explorers. These after-school classes motivated students to collaborate with one another to solve problems relevant to their lives. This is just a snapshot of the amazing work our staff is conducting to get our youth excited to learn. As we welcome customers back into our buildings, we recognize that there were some that would still face barriers to returning. For too long, our policies of imposing fines for late library material has discouraged individuals from accessing our services, especially youth. We temporarily suspended late fines during the pandemic, and in October of 2021, Queens Public Library, along, as you heard, with Brooklyn and New York Public Library Systems, permanently ended the practice of charging late fines on overdue material and cleared all existing late fines on customers' accounts. This bold act cleared late fines on 289,000 accounts in Queens and unblocked almost 28,000 cards. Since the new policy was enacted on October 5th, there has been a 10% increase in the number of impacted cardholders who borrow physical material compared with the month prior, and 16% increase in request activities among impacted cardholders. We hope the new policy continues to encourage more people, especially our young customers, to return to their libraries or become cardholders no matter what their circumstances. Queens Public Library is dedicated to being there for our customers, including our youth population, who depend on us to provide for educational resources and extracurricular programming that sparks their interest and curiosity. New York City's 3 public library systems must be adequately funded in the new fiscal year in order to continue offering these high-quality programs and services. For fiscal year 2023, we are respectfully requesting reallocation of the Council's library initiative at a minimum of $14 million, as well as an increased funding from the administration in the amount of $15.7 million. This funding will allow us to boost both physical and digital collections, fill vacancies, and address emergency repairs, and more. In addition, all 3 public library systems need consistent and considerable capital investment to ensure our youth are learning and exploring in a safe, modern, and welcoming facility that they deserve. In our 10-year capital plan submitted to the city, we have identified a need of $270 million over the next 10 years, $98.6 million for fiscal year 2023 alone. This funding will cover projected deficits and initiate projects in need of immediate capital attention. Every day, Queens Public Library transforms lives by cultivating intellectual and personal growth. As the center of community life, we build strong neighborhoods through the multitude of free programs and services we provide. In partnership with the City Council and the Adams administration, we can continue to aid in the reduction of learning loss in our BIPOC youth communities. Chair Osei, thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you so much. I will now turn it over to Chair Osei for questions. After Chair Osei, we will turn to council members for additional questions. As a reminder, we will call on council members in the order that you raise your hand in Zoom using the Zoom raise hand function. Panelists, please stay unmuted if possible during this question and answer period. Thank you, and back to you, Chair Osei.
Thank you so much, Brenda. And I just want to start by thanking, President Marks, President Johnson, and Mr. Buren for being here today, as well as doing all of the work that you are doing at our amazing libraries. I really do appreciate just the support system that you all have been during the pandemic, and still currently right now. While we are still in a pandemic, there is this curve that we are dealing with in terms of addressing the education loss of our young children of New York. So I want to start with understanding the problem and a couple of questions that pertain to that. And the first is, as you know, the closure of city schools in the March of 2020 to limit the spread of the coronavirus and subsequent abrupt transition to remote learning, including only 3 days for teacher training, had a serious impact on all areas of instruction. What do the libraries view as the largest barriers to young people's learning losses during the pandemic?
Well, I'm not sure where to begin. I mean, it's all of it, right? I mean, it's the dislocation, the fright, the not having regular school. Kids need routines. We know that from our own childhood and our own kids, and all that was disrupted. In addition to not everyone has. Think about what Nick said about the digital access. I mean, we had everything online. It was amazing. I mean, obviously we could have done more, but I thought it was an astonishing pivot. And, and yet, what is it? 1-2 million New Yorkers don't have broadband at home in a moment when you can't go to school, you can't, do your job, you can't live. I mean, so the list goes on and on.
Right.
Yeah, I would echo, Tony's remarks. I think, not having access to the web as you're trying to go to school via Zoom is obviously a non-starter, and the numbers are staggering. I have with me today Kevin Kelly, who's a new employee of Brooklyn Public Library, but deeply steeped in libraries and working on this issue in particular. Kevin, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Linda. I would say this is like a very complex question, but two things that jump out to me right at the front is that digital access, yes, is like very important. 2 million people don't have Wi-Fi at home, but young people, though they are born sort of what we call digital natives, still lack media competency, like the capacity to browse, to look, and to engage with media in a constructive way, in a way that they, get in libraries when they're with their librarian. They get navigated through these digital spaces in a way that's more constructive, maybe than they can do at home, because not every parent also is that has the capacity to embrace the digital landscape in the way that a librarian is. And then the other, I would say, echoes this fear. As we all know, or as we know with kids, part of their socio-emotional learning is the need for in-person relationships, a need for community. And I would say that is a huge barrier. I know that I felt it. I felt scared and alone, and I'm a grown-up. And I felt disconnected from my peers. And I think that children, as we think about sort of moving out of the pandemic, if we want to address learning loss, one of the ways I think that the library can address that fear is being a hub of the community for these kids. I mean, you've been maybe in a children's space pre-pandemic, and you've seen the life and the vibrancy, and that is such a barrier. If the kid doesn't have that life, that vibrancy, that support of their community, I think that is bad, and it's important that they have it. And I'll I'll end there.
That was well stated, Kevin. You're absolutely right about the digital access, about the socialization, and I think it really highlighted the importance of what libraries do. We do help with the education, of course we do, and we are dedicated to information, but we are also dedicated to cultural and to recreation as well. And so we bring all four of these things of great importance, and to be able to connect to those young people who voluntarily self-identify and come to us every day physically. Really we needed to get them to come to us virtually as well. And so now we have this great opportunity, and I think it's good to look at the positive, to really still be able to connect virtually and to bring people in person, to really hit them with those caring, positive staff members that we have, to really, help them through this digital divide and this socialization and the need for a little recreation in a positive place as well.
Absolutely. Before I move on to my next question, I do want to announce that Councilmember Hanif is also on this hearing as well. Now, I do want to ask you all, how do the libraries identify those students that need the support? What were the demographics of the students who needed the most support? For example, racial backgrounds, grade level, household income, etc.
I've got some numbers and there's some in the testimony. I don't know, Giselle, do you want to, you're more closer to the ground on this?
Sure, thank you. Great question. So basically for identifying a lot of our students, we started our NYPL After School as a pilot program, and we started the launch in 2020. The pandemic happened. So really it was focused on kids who naturally dropped in and would ask the librarian for help, and just assessing what that need is and just having the tutors on site as part of that. So it's just really knowing our staff in the branches, knowing who needs help and promoting that service.
Not only that, Giselle is correct, and it's nice to see you again. But, so like I said before, we have young people that self-select themselves to come to us, but we really have to go to them too. And that's where, the outreach to schools was really hurt because, we couldn't get into schools because of that. And that's really restarting now. But our outreach teams were very, vital to, get those mobile units out and get into the community, whether it's community centers, whether it's cultural centers, whether it's temporary housing, to actually bring the library to them as well, to reintroduce the library even during the pandemic. And it was a little tricky at times, of course, when you can only have so many people on a mobile library at one time, but just to get the word out that the library is still there for you and that we're there to assist.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to all of those comments other than the emphasis that we placed as soon as the weather was permitted in using our outdoor spaces to gather people around in a way that was safe and socially distanced, and continue to keep people in the habit of visiting their local library.
Thank you. And which branches or neighborhoods did all of you see the highest need and demands for learning support? And how did you track this information in particular?
So I could speak, mainly for New York Public Library, the South Bronx neighborhoods were those that mostly needed extra support, because we were not seeing people utilizing. Normally, pre-pandemic, there was an influx of students coming into the library, and that loss, is quite deep. And Harlem for some of our neighborhoods, and the Port Richmond area in Staten Island.
Nick, go ahead. Oh, you're on. Nick needs to be unmuted.
I keep muting myself after I go because I've been so used to this for the last 2 years.
Keep yourselves off mute.
Yes, thank you. I will. I will not mute
We're
again.
going to learn this just in time to be perfect for the last Zoom.
My mother would say I need to mute myself more often, not less often. Okay. We were able to identify, we did demographics and, we did want to look at locations. We looked at Lefrak City, the area of Lefrak City, South Jamaica, Astoria, Long Island City. We really needed to get, assistance out to Far Rockaway as well. These were areas that we traditionally have known that we wanted to look at, in good times, these are locations that need extra support, and that, we do try to get, either additional programming or always make sure that we have our after school stacks program there. But, once we realized that, there were, that the digital divide, that people still weren't getting their laptops from the DOE, and we were hearing from teachers that kids were sharing their laptops with their siblings. This is where we at least wanted to get the hotspots out. And then when we were able to get funding for laptops, we wanted to start working on that as well. I will not mute.
I would just add, and by the way, Nick, I'm famous for speaking while muted at least once a day. 2 years in, still doing it. We, had long identified which neighborhood libraries had deepest need. That was something that's been going on well before the pandemic, and just continued to follow the data and the work that we had done pre-pandemic to continue to kind of emphasize where our support was.
Can I just add, look, we obviously provide services across all neighborhoods, all demographics in our areas, though we don't target particularly demographics. We certainly target particularly neighborhoods that need particular programs. And one of the great powers of the library is we can't force anybody to come. So the numbers you're hearing are evidence of meeting real need, because otherwise people simply wouldn't come. We don't, because of privacy, we're the last people left on the planet who protect privacy. So we don't sort of track individuals in that way, but we certainly track zip codes, et cetera. We do surveys, all that. Lastly, let me just state the obvious, which is, the great tragic story of America and of New York, which is we know where these neighborhoods are because we've always known where these neighborhoods are. In New York, in the United States, the poorest neighborhoods are also the highest proportion of where BIPOC students and families are living, and where the schools have failed most dramatically to provide the kind of opportunity, or at least to keep the kids going on that line of opportunity. I mean, it's, we know, the South Bronx comes up for us as the obvious first example. Not surprisingly, it's the poorest neighborhood congressional district in the United States of America, right? The pattern is very clear, which is why we can clearly focus on addressing that pattern. I wish it were otherwise, but we see it, right?
Right. Well, thank you for your answers. I do want to, move on to see how libraries address the problem during this pandemic. And I know many of you brought this up throughout your testimonies, but please describe the various ways in which learning was lost during the pandemic, and how did this specifically affect BIPOC youth, and in what ways are the libraries responding to this, especially when tackling remote learning?
Giselle, you want to get us started? That's all right. Again, Giselle is, I visit and I see the results, but Giselle's got the team and she's seeing it right now.
So pretty much we've addressed it by just spending time with the staff, just talking to some of the staff. The teams have sent out surveys just to understand what was happening and what's changed during that period of time, because we were closed. And then it's like reopening, and what do we do? How do we serve? What needs to happen next? So pretty much, looking at what that loss is, talking our school outreach teams, hearing from some of the local teachers, the schools, as to how can the public library provide service, but we were still in this virtual space and trying to connect and, keep the work going that we have been doing in person. So that's some ways that we have focused on just assessing the loss and figuring out post-pandemic, we're still in a pandemic, what do we need to do next?
Adults were fantastic at moving to virtual programming. They really embraced the virtual programming. And our children's librarians, worked with parents and caregivers to give programming to very young children and move our story time in a virtual environment. And that was very successful. Quite honestly, it was much tougher for the middle school and high school to move them to a virtual environment, in spite of as Kevin said, everyone thinks that that teenagers are so adept at using technology, but it was really difficult to bring them in. And what we found is it was vital when we opened in person is to really make a concentrated effort to physically bring in middle school and high school kids again, because that's how they want to interact with the public library. They want to interact with us, in person. And I think that was vital for us. And quite honestly, it was a learning as well. We thought that they might embrace that virtual environment as much as other age groups, and it really wasn't the case. And we believe it's that socialization that is so vital to what the library offers.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's difficult to make a broad general statement about how it impacted a swath of our patrons. I think it varied by individuals, but for sure, parents who had done yeoman's work trying to minimize the amount of screen time that their children had pre-pandemic, and then moving them to an environment where their entire lives were lived online, kind of pushed the traditional experience of reading and borrowing books and bringing the books back to the library and then taking out more, and the whole tactile experience, that kind of just became a relic of the past. And that's a shame. We knew it was happening anyway. Obviously, like so many other things, the pandemic just accelerated it. But I think parents who are actively involved in their children's literacy are struggling with the notion of how to get their kids back into the enjoyment, the sheer pleasure of reading. And hopefully our summer reading program will help reinstitute that. But it's sad.
Right. And what would you say are some valuable lessons that you all learned from pivoting to alternative forms of support and resources during the pandemic that you can share and perhaps the city can build upon in their programmatic initiatives?
I guess I'll just start by saying I think we learned that the digital is essential, right? I mean, we sort of invested in it for a decade or longer, and suddenly it was everything, right? And there's things we can do that we can't do physically. But I think we also learned, as Linda was just saying, we're not cavemen. We don't all want to sit at home alone in front of a screen. Teens, I think in particular, I mean, that's why the teen centers are through the roof. But also I think we learned, again, we knew this, but we learned it in harder this time, which is even though the teens and the kids are digital natives, right? So you'd think that was, as Nick was saying, they're not necessarily thinking of the library in that way. They've got lots of options, lots of other platforms. We, as much as we're doing, we're sort of doing double what we used to be doing, but I think the missing piece is sort of the outreach piece, the sort of, as has been heard, which is how do we get out there and get the message out that it's cool, that different things are happening, that other kids are, and teens are hanging out, that this is the place, et cetera. And, again, that's going to be, some combo of digital and and analog outreach, celebrity outreach, mass media outreach, social media outreach, whatever it is, right? But we can't just assume, if you build it, they will come. Actually, no, you got to also, sort of invite them and make them feel like it's their space, right?
And the three library systems did a very good job moving to a virtual environment and then back to in-person right now. What we've learned is we really have to do both. And that takes a lot more resources. It sounds easy just to do a virtual programming, but there's a lot of components to doing virtual programming. At its height, we were doing 70 a week. That takes a lot of back office work to make sure that all that technology works well. Some programs are great in a virtual environment, and some are absolutely not. The children's program that I just talked about, Storytime, we did it really well in a virtual environment, but that relationship between the librarians and children and their caregivers really happens best in person. Yeah. But some programming for older, adults were much better in a virtual environment, ironically, because more people were able to attend, even though, again, sometimes we think, oh, the older you are, the less likely you are to use the technology. And that was not true either. So it was a really great way for us to see that what we knew before, relationships are key. And, it's really the staff. A positive staff member can make a program with a bunch of middle school or high school kids. And they are the key to this. And that's why they're our best resource is the staff that we work with.
Yeah. So
I don't want to belabor the point, but I just want to emphasize a couple things. One, and both Nick and Tony have alluded to this. We learned that we needed to accelerate, and we did, all of us, the rate at which we were evolving into a digital enterprise. And so that happened, and it was terrific. And so now we have this scenario where we are returning to the traditional bricks and mortar business, but also understanding deeply how important the digital component of what we do is and will continue to be. And so we are essentially running two operations which require more resources. It is much more expensive to do business the way we are now, and we need to figure that out. And it's true what Nick also says about the importance of staff, and I would add the importance of place. That completely abandoning the more traditional model that libraries have been known for over 120 years doesn't work either. That what we do in each community has a benefit not only to the individuals who take advantage of the offerings, but to the community as a whole, that our place, our sort of role as the glue in the community needs to be maintained in order to keep our communities healthy. And the only way for us to do that is to keep what's happening in those branches, the programs that we offer need to stay relevant in order to keep people coming into that place and having all of the ancillary benefits that go with being in a physical space together with your neighbors.
And are the libraries planning to continue these technology services and programs even as students are going back to school in person?
Absolutely. As I said, we're never going back.
Right. And have you seen an increase or decrease in demand for services, or has it stayed relatively the same?
At New York Public, we've had a mix. We've had patrons reach out and request that we keep the virtual presence, but we recognize there are some communities that have not met us in that virtual space. So having in-person program, of course, just gets everyone in who may not have access. But then it's thinking, how do we do so? A quality program where you're serving an in-person audience and allowing, digitally someone to come in and have the same quality experience, because it's quite difficult. We're learning that. That audience engagement is, robust when it's live and it's in person versus someone tuning in live stream. And I'll give a demonstration. If I'm giving a story time and the audience is this way, and I'm reading to that group of children, it's somewhat hard that you guys get ignored on the screen, right? Because my focus is now in the room. So even if we have the right digital equipment, it's always being mindful that staff are trained to engage with that audience, right? Virtually and in person.
Giselle says it well, and it's as Linda said, we're doing two operations now, and we're in the process, and it's not as easy as one meeting to figure out of what works best in each format, what works best, virtually, what works best in person, and quite honestly, what works best in a hybrid environment. And that's what Giselle was saying, is like, it seems easy, just start recording, but that's not it if you want to engage the virtual audience. And it will increase our program content that we can also draw from too, but this is a process that takes more time, money, and resources.
The only thing I would add to all of this is it's not only about more, but there are some librarians who have very naturally become, superb at offering virtual programs, and others who are not as comfortable there. And so it's not just a matter of, finding ways to make more time for people to do both, but actually figuring out how to take advantage of our skill sets. And not everybody's good at everything. And this has created kind of you know, it's created an interesting situation where the people who are on the front line and weren't necessarily so great at on the virtual side, you know, were working at a different rate during the pandemic than those who were busy creating virtual content all the time. And now as things are shifting, you know, the kind of sands are shifting under our feet again, and this all is going to take some time to work itself out.
And do the libraries have enough devices to meet the demands?
I mean, that's a matter of priority. You know, this gets to how we deploy our resources, and whether we're spending money on tech or on people or on material, you know, hard copy material. And so I think all of us are adjusting as we need to. We need a general pot and the flexibility to spend it as each of our systems need it.
So would you say no?
No, I would not say that the amount of hardware we have is an issue for us. I would not say that was the case.
Okay.
We're okay. We have enough hardware, and we can always fix that if we don't.
Okay.
Jeremy, we did work hard with the controller's office so that more of technology could be capital eligible. Obviously,
Great point.
But that meant we could address that in a systemic way that we were in the past.
And by the way, like, far be it from me to say that we have enough of anything, especially to this group. We always need more. That is the mantra here. We have more, we can do more.
Right.
Well, I want to double that. Yes, that's true. But again, I just want to make the point, which is, you know, we've always been the library, the most visited civic institution in every neighborhood in town. And then we became the digital library, and in our case, aspirations to help that. I think we're all agreed in a sort of global way, not just in a New York City way. So that's sort of doubling our task. And let's remember the point of this testimony of today's hearing, which is we understand we need to add additional resources as well as sort of covering our bases, but additional resources for BIPOC students, for, you know, neighborhoods in particular need. If you just think about the math, what we're saying is we're sort of doing 2.5 times what we used to do on basically the same budget. I mean, it's gone up with inflation, et cetera, or not quite with inflation now, I imagine. But, you know, I mean, that's a challenge. And, you know, that's not whinging. It's just the reality, and we're doing it, right? But, you know, there are limits at some point, right?
Yeah. And just to piggyback on that as well, I mean, we can get laptops for, you know, lots of laptops for our community, you know, without understanding that we have to maintain those. And in 3 years, they have to all be replaced all over again. It's the maintenance of the equipment. And I'm going to throw in here that it's the maintenance of our facilities. And, you know, I think it would be remiss of me if I didn't say that when we have non-capitally eligible repairs that we have to do in our places, and we have to spend expense money on a boiler, that could take out a lot of laptops and hotspots that we otherwise would have bought, because we have to buy a boiler in order to not have a place closed down for over 6 months just because we can't provide heat. So it really is all interconnected as well.
Also, just because we're always talking about what our patrons need, and maybe we're like the, you know, cobbler whose kids don't have shoes. Just as the pandemic hit, we were replacing all of the tech, you know, at the back of the house for our staff. And so we need to resume all of that. We need to make sure that our teams have the equipment, the hardware, the software that they need in order to do their work as well.
I do want to pivot a little bit away from technology. Thank you for answering those questions, but I also wanted to ask, what outreach did the libraries do to ensure that the most impacted students, such as low-income students, students with disabilities, and English language learners, had access to the library's resources?
So that is what we do. I mean, we have outreach teams that have been doing this for years, and it's part of our bread and butter. And we continue to the extent that we weren't, you know, didn't have our hands tied to do that during the pandemic. And we have it's all anecdotal, but, you know, stories about librarians who, you know, picked up the phone and called patrons, especially like with older adults who's, you know, were maybe shut in, and there was already a phone relationship that had been established, but, you know, reaching out to children who, you know, or families with children who were sort of on shaky ground before the pandemic. That, you know, we have a whole outreach team And we could spend an entire hearing talking about the work that that team does to make sure, especially that marginalized and kind of vulnerable patrons are kept in the fold.
We had American Sign Language story time in various languages because in Queens and in the rest of the city you can't really do something in just English. And as I had said earlier, really the outreach to temporary housing when during the lockdown was, when we were just able to get things rolling in terms of just a little bit of outreach, that was the first place we needed to go, is temporary housing where families were living. Just to make that connection, whether it's just, giving them books, giving them, packets of supplies, any craft, anything that would make that connection. For it was a connection with the library, but really it was the vital connection of anything that was coming because there wasn't much, really interconnectivity. So,
yeah.
As Linda said, this is what we do though.
Yeah. All three systems work in the shelters. Yep. We work with parents and families that have somebody who's incarcerated. This whole notion of just sort of being in a building with four walls is really no longer the library model. And so, for example, when the pandemic hit, we were all working on, at least in Brooklyn, I should say, we were working hard on census outreach. So we already had people in the streets out there trying to get people into the library to make sure that Brooklyn was represented appropriately in the census. And that those folks continue to do that work even under the lockdown.
Yeah, for us, we did a lot of grassroots outreach where we did neighborhood walks, just getting out in the community so that people see that we were back. We weren't fully open, we had limited service, but our staff spending time trying to reconnect. And I know a lot of the businesses and the community-based organizations had protocols in place, but we would do, call just to reconnect and then show up and provide information about what services we were offering, even if we were in a virtual space. Our school outreach teams just calling those school coordinators to, remind, like, yes, we're virtual, but here are resources that's available to you.
All right.
I could just add that, in addition to all the things that were ongoing and the special efforts, I think that it's worth noting that, we stepped up whenever we could and volunteered whenever we could to be testing sites, to be vaccination sites. And again, that was a parallel important thing for us to do, but it was also important for us as a way to say to our communities, we're here in whatever way you need us to be here. And when the testing of the vaccines are over, we're still here in all the other ways you need us to be.
Also here we are for the testing and the vaccines, everything we could do. In Brooklyn alone, we've given, I think almost 40,000 test kits. Wow. We've distributed.
Well, I want to move to my last portion of questioning before hearing from my colleagues. And I know that some of you have answered these throughout this entire hearing, but just for the record, I would love to hear about plans for the future in terms of closing the learning gap. So the first question is, how do the libraries plan to continue to close the learning gap as we recover from this pandemic?
Again, that's our bread and butter. We are actually always in the process of helping school-age children keep up with their work. We're never better than when we're coordinated with schools, so that what's happening in the library dovetails with the pedagogy that's in the local schools. And nothing like good teachers and principals working with great librarians to make that all come together, and we'll continue to do that.
We want
that involves virtual, that involves on the ground. That's just kind of infused in everything that we do.
While we want to expand the initiatives that we have, we're going to do that with the resources that we have to continue with high school and college readiness, with really providing digital classes for teenagers, with, as Linda said, supporting them in their middle school, high school, and into college years. And that positive relationship that we have with young adult librarians who are very much focused on working with teenagers and serving as that bridge for them to be able to use the resources of the library, youth counselors that we have in many key areas as well. We're going to do this, but with the needed funding, we could do it at the level that's absolutely needed. For now, we're doing it at the level that we can.
Oh, I'll just say, I think everything you've heard, we need to rebuild and we need to expand. And, we need to double down, and that includes the after-school programs. The summer learning is key, including the book giveaways that we're talking about. I'll just say, for me, the teen center is, what I want to keep my eye on, which is, can we increase to at least 20 low-income neighborhoods? And I simply say that, partly this is anecdotal and partly based on what Giselle and the experts tell me, which is you just see that this is a place where the teens they're so eager to come in and be together and try different things and argue about things and, use the studios and the maker spaces, all of that. And then, of course, the programs to get them into colleges or onto careers or whatever combination makes sense for them. That's what we need. We are keeping our eye on in terms of the substance of the response. And it's simply a matter of the resources that we're going to have to be able to do this as, rebuild and expand as fast and as much as we can.
But I think outreach is key, and not to beat a dead horse, but the issue is that there's a lot of competition for teens. And we can do great things once we have them engaged, but the trick is to be building spaces and offering programs that are attractive to teens and that beat out the not so positive things that we compete with.
As many of you all know, our students, even in a progressive city like New York, still lack a diverse education, such as learning more about Black history in schools and maybe LGBTQ history as well. How do the libraries work to close those gaps in our educational system?
Well, our fundamental response is to make all that material available and ensure that it's available. There are parts of the country where that's not the case purposefully, where people are banning books. And you've probably read, that, all three systems have done various things to try to unban books, particularly for BIPOC students and LGBTQ issue. Those are where the bannings are focused. So that's where the unbannings need to be focused. But this is, as Linda says, this is very much our bread and butter. It has to be.
Mm-hmm. Right. And the last question that I have is for you, President Marks. The Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture is one of the New York Public Library's research libraries and serves as a repository for information on people of African descent worldwide. Can you tell us more about resources for young people available through the Schomburg Center, including the Junior Scholars Program?
Sure. Well, the Junior Scholars Program has been going for a while now. We've had support from the Mellon Foundation as well as the City Council for that program and other programs at the Schomburg. Look, as you said, it is the preeminent National Archive Center for the study of African American and diaspora history. It's in Harlem. It has amazing staff with a great new director, Joy Bivens, first female director of the Schomburg, which is great, as is she. And we're committed to the Teen Center, but also getting the collections out physically as well as digitally to folks. We acquired the James Baldwin Archive. You've got everything that everyone's going to be excited about because, as Linda says, we are competing for teens' attention. And we can't just sit here and sort of say, well, we're the library, they should come. We have to make it so exciting and so interesting and so unique that they want to come. And we see that fully. And the Schomburg is a great resource for us, though it's not just the Schomburg. I want to be clear. The Schomburg is our headliner in this regard, but it's the whole system needs to be doing this. The whole research library, the branches, all of it, the collections in every regard.
And one last question, how can the council best support the libraries in serving young people in these programs, particularly like the Junior Scholars Program?
Well, look, I think your targeted support is fabulous, but I think we all agree we need to ensure if we spend our time backfilling and worrying about holes that are developing because we don't have baseline funding, then we cannot plan, we cannot build, we cannot sustain across the board. Yes, it's great when the city council partners with us, for instance, with the Junior Fellows Program or other things that we have partnered with that have helped these particular communities. But if we're sitting around, to be honest, as systems or our staff worrying about an $8 million hole we have to fill from last year and always having to do that every year, that's not productive energy. I'll just be honest, right? Or not useful energy.
Listen, I definitely understand that. I got to ask those questions so that we have those on the record so that when I'm approaching my colleagues throughout this budget dance, they know that too. That concludes my questioning portion, and I'll pass it on to you, Brenda.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you to the libraries. So I will now call on council members in the order that they have raised their hand using the Zoom raise hand function. Council members, if you would like to ask a question and you have not yet used the Zoom raise hand function, please do so now. Please keep your questions to 5 minutes. The sergeant at arms will keep a timer and will let you know when your time is up. You should begin once I call on you and the sergeant has announced that you may begin. So first we will hear from Councilmember Dinowitz, followed by Councilmember Joseph. Councilmember Dinowitz, you may begin when ready.
Time starts now.
Thank you so much. I just have to say I love our libraries, and it's so incredibly impressive what you do with such a inadequate budget. Even like in middle school, I was one of those kids that would go hang out with my friends after school, go to the library. I'd check out materials. They were usually VHS tapes. And for my colleagues who don't know what a VHS is, you can Google it. But I did those programs. I did the poetry writing. I did short story writing. And as a father, I brought my twins to Mozart and Scribble and story time. And we're using the reading chart. It looks like Miss Dixon's poster in the background, actually, the one that we're using.
Summer reading.
It's like we play a little game. It's like each time you read a book, But look, I know about the library. I went there. I take my kids there. They know it. We love it. We use it. But when I was as a high school special education teacher in the Bronx, like early in my career, I remember I was chatting with some students in one of my self-contained classes. I made some comment about going to the library, and I found out a lot of them didn't have a library card. So I had to, after school, we walked to the library together so they can get a card, and they discovered in high school how amazing our libraries are. And throughout my career, I would discover similar stories when students didn't have broadband at home. So I would direct them to the library just to find out they didn't know where their local branch was. I remember at some point, a school aide came by my classroom and handed me a stack of library cards for the kids. And that was kind of the extent of the outreach done. And I'm saying this to highlight the fact that you do incredible work, and especially targeting BIPOC communities. You're very thoughtful in your programming. And there are gaps from COVID, but as Tony Marks said, these built upon already existing gaps. I'm concerned, and you've mentioned a number of times, about the students who aren't engaged, my students. I'm concerned about those students who are typically left behind, students with disabilities, for example. I love that you did outreach to temporary housing. I think that was very creative and exactly what needed to be done. But as Nick Buron said, relationships are key. Our teachers, our school faculty, they often have the relationships with students. I'm wondering what work, or has the DOE reached out to the public library, NYPL, Queens, Brooklyn, to really integrate your programming into the curriculum, into the culture of the school system, not so that's not based on an individual teacher like me or an individual principal who happens to get library cards for kids, and that have they provided any data that helps evaluate the effectiveness of the programming offered to the kids?
So, council member, I'll dive in. First, it's great to see you. And yes, I think we agree. I think you've got 6 branches in your neighborhood doing amazing things.
They're all great.
Of course, all branches are great. I'll just say a shout out that Kingsbridge and Moshalou have two of our after school centers. So that program that we're so excited about, and having made much about the teen centers as really a sort of fulcrum for this effort, I'm delighted that the Van Cortlandt Library will have a teen center opening this summer. So that's terrific. And of course, that's a brand new, much improved facility.
You can't believe what I'm doing here.
Hi, Linda. Good to hear you.
Hi, guys.
And, lastly, I'll just say the data, we can get you more data, and Giselle may have some, but I need to say, one of our issues is, you can't do any of this, the outreach, all the programs, et cetera, without the staffing. And, it's hard to hire these days. We all know that. But part of why it's hard to hire is, we don't have the funding for the positions. People.
Can I just pause you for a sec? Because I totally understand that and appreciate that, which is why I'm interested more in, the DOE's budget is like 200 times or 250 times your budget, right? So that's why I'm asking kind of what outreach the DOE has done to you, and kind of how if they've come to the table offering to really integrate what you're already doing into what they're doing in the classroom, into the curriculum, into the culture, so that we can really get the marginalized students. I'm talking about the students with disabilities. I'm talking about students who didn't grow up like I did, whose parents may not have taken them to the library. That was really more the direction of my question.
I have a really good relationship with My Library NYC, which is a DOE-centered program that for us gets to 90 schools, middle schools and high schools. And so, that's been a way for our staff to be able to go into the schools and be able to, continue relationships more than just, the one-on-one that you were talking about earlier, which used to be the more traditional, invite your local librarian just to come to your local school. So this is a little bit more centered. And if it's 90 for us, I know it's more throughout the system. And it's worth mentioning that even during the pandemic, we had a South Jamaica Reads initiative that worked with the middle schools in the South Jamaica area, where it was a combination of the DOE, the library, and even Scholastic got involved to really be able to get some books into their hands. So it takes a lot to get three groups together, and I think that's it. I think, quite honestly, these are the bigger initiatives that we're doing, more than just what you're talking about. But we're always looking, to try to work with the DOE on bigger initiatives.
Okay, I'll just say, as Nick said, My Libraries, we're now, I think the three systems are effectively the circulating libraries for half the public schools. That was simply not the case, which was, crazy before we cooperated in that way. Our after-school programs, obviously, in coordination with the DOE. Giselle and her teams are talking to the DOE all the time. Let me just say, the Center for Educators and Students is where we're going to focus this in, particularly for the research library. So that's additional resources. Lastly, we all see the difficulties that the DOE has had to work under and the general challenges that they have to work under. They're big. They got a lot going on. They're not the easiest partner to sort of, make deals that work with for lots of reasons, not for lack of good intentions on either side. But I think it's increasingly obvious that these need to be coordinated and that's what we've been doing and trying to do.
Great. I know my time's up, but I just want to thank you all, especially for the work you're doing for our youth and especially our older adults, and really for everyone. Libraries are for everyone. Incredible resource. I want to thank you for all of the work you're doing with not enough resources. Really, it's the truth.
Thank you so much, Council Member. We'll next go to the next Council Member in the queue, which will be Council Member Joseph, followed by Council Member Hanif. Council Member Joseph, you may begin when the Sergeant calls the clock. Thank you.
Time starts now.
Good morning, Chair Osei. Thank you so much for having this wonderful hearing. Public Library, first and foremost, as a former educator, let me say thank you to you. We've always been a partner, especially Flatbush. I want to shout out Flatbush Linden Boulevard.
Yes, I know you're using it regularly, and we love that.
Correct. And we've always had a partnership in terms of supporting the immigrant community. At one point, you were a hub for us creating IDNYC for our adult programming. So thank you for that. And that was very important to us. And also partnering up with our schools to bring in books, drop off. At one point, we were doing library cards without the students having to leave to go to the library. So the library came to us. So that, I thank you so much. My question, during the pandemic, I know this uprooted everyone's life, but I have a particular vulnerable community that I serve near and dear to my heart. My ENL students were left behind by every major institution, I can say. And in the DOE system, we have about 145,000 of them, and they were left behind. I want to know, how was the library able to support them during the pandemic, and moving forward, how do we plan to support them in the future? As long also with their parents as well, because immigrant children come with immigrant parents. So how can we work together to support our ENL students and also our parents? Anybody?
Broad question. We have a broad network of language programs for people who are learning English as a second language. It's pervasive throughout the whole spectrum of services that we offer, from from birth to lifelong learning, as we say, and immigrants, as well as people who need additional language skills, who are perhaps not as recent to this country. But we offer classes, both drop-in and things that can be registered for, and we're going to continue to do that. We've tried to convert these to virtual programs as well. We know that people who are most vulnerable can't take advantage of those. So I think that especially as the weather warms up, we'll be able to do more outside. And as you may know, we've really made a robust push into outside programming and building spaces outdoors so that people feel comfortable coming back. I think it's persistence and making sure that we're offering these classes in as many languages as there is demand. And we do it not only with our great library staff, but also with volunteers.
And just to piggyback on that, even outside of Brooklyn, where Linda's talking about, in Queens, we were doing bilingual story times. And that's the good thing about the virtual environment, is that anyone was able to come from anywhere. And so, even though we might have done things in one community, really it was, able to be open. The ESOL classes that we were doing virtually kind of surprised us that so many people were taking advantage of it. Here again, we were making assumptions that, that there were groups of people that some were stronger than others in the technology field. And yet, our immigrant community was pretty good at coming to our virtual classes. We were doing bilingual home health aid series classes as well as bilingual tech classes. And so, we've always, all three library systems have been pretty good at dealing with, more than just English classes. And that actually translated for us at Queens into a pretty good virtual environment. And now we're back, and yet this is one of the questions about continuing virtual bilingual or even other languages as well.
Also, the virtual programs attracted huge numbers of people that we otherwise wouldn't be able to reach. There are all kinds of anecdotes about story times in different languages that had 100 times the number of people participating than you would ordinarily see on a typical morning in a branch.
And virtual environment means that we also are able to do this outside of our regular hours. And so sometimes that's not very convenient for hardworking people in our communities to also go to classes. And so, by being able to provide those classes, sometimes it's at off times, then we would traditionally do those classes, in regular library hours, really opened it up for people to be able to take advantage of as well.
Just one last thing. As you may know, there's about 1.3 million adult learners in this New York City that are immigrants. How are you helping them in terms of their digital divide? Because I know that was an area which they also faced a lot of challenges as well.
We're proud to always have been for the immigrant community. We're the place that everyone trusts, everyone feels respected, no paper questions, no privacy. It's why we could do the census, et cetera. and we think that is first and foremost, and it's why we have to do the English language programs. It's why we're not first and foremost, but it's a core responsibility. And it's why, for instance, we have the largest English language programs in the city outside of the public schools and CUNY, why everything we do for free, why we focus on getting more different language material into the collections, hiring more amazing staff who have these languages, using technology. And as my colleague said, delighted when we were surprised to find people staying with us digitally because they need us. That's a good sign. But, again, it's a budget constraint. I mean, there's only so much time in the day. We got virtual, and we've got, people who say, no, it only works for me in person. And we don't want to breaks our heart to think we can't deal with that. And we get stretched, which is why we're here talking about this. Right?
Got it. Thank you so much, Cheryl Say. Thank you so much, Public Libraries, for all that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember. We will now move to Councilmember Hanif for questions. You may begin when the sergeant calls the clock.
Time starts now.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon and hello to Chair Osei. Big fan of libraries, and what an honor to be able to really look after the libraries I grew up attending in my district, particularly Borough Park and Windsor Terrace. So thank you so much for your collaboration and coordination and just the continued work that needs to be done, especially in the south part of my district. I've been really inspired to see the outdoor library, which is outside of my district in Yeager's district at the Kensington Library. I was curious to know if there's additional funding to continue to expand the outdoor library program. And then in addition to that, I'm looking to expand the open streets programming in my district on the streets adjacent to libraries. I want to know the feasibility of that and if there's excitement or enthusiasm, but would want to use these streets to gather families and would be a supporter to coordinate programming. You could count on my office to be a strong collaborator. I'm just really appreciative of the libraries and for continuing to be stalwarts of learning and enjoyment. So would love to hear a little bit more about the outdoor programming and what we can do as council members to push those efforts.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for your support. And I know you have a long tradition of working closely with us in your previous life as well. So much appreciated. Yes, the outdoor piece is central to has been central to the delivery of service over the past 2 years. And we're excited to get to be at that moment in the year where we're reopening those spaces once again, including Kensington. We borrowed the model initially from the restaurant industry, took a look at what was happening and said, how can we do this? And obviously the easiest locations were the ones that had land that didn't require DOT permits. But once we sort of hit all of the easy low-hanging fruit, we did, of course, partner with the DOT and would be happy to continue to do that. We're always looking for new opportunities. And I think the best thing to do would be to go take this offline and make sure that my office is working with you to figure out if there's specific areas where you're interested that we haven't already planned or that we're in the process of planning.
Yeah, that'd be really exciting. And I've been listening in on your testimonies and your remarks to the questions asked in the past, that, the libraries have the onus of getting young people into them. And I think our open streets are a big factor. And I'd love to be a partner in just thinking about how we get more young people involved and how we get immigrant families really engaged, how we get more books in other languages. I'm really excited to be doing this event for Eid with the Brooklyn Children's Museum, where I'll be reading a children's book written by a Muslim woman author. I mean, there's just so many, so much happening right now.
We're moving our library into the Brooklyn Children's Museum, which will happen later this year.
Excellent.
And that's got outdoor space planned already. I think there are 13 new sites located for this coming season with outdoor space. And I'm just getting a text that says that I think we're scheduled to meet with you this Friday. So we'll
That's
be sure
right.
that this is on the agenda.
I'm excited and looking forward to that. Well, thank you so much, and looking forward to continuing to work together and really bring in the outdoor learning component, outdoor space component to our work in my district in particular.
Yeah, I think Borough Park in particular is one of the new ones that's coming online.
I think we're all doing this across the system. I mean, we're going from 7 to 17 outdoor locations. And the Niarchos Library here is the only outdoor public terrace for free in Manhattan. And, you know, we're now adding one at Lincoln Center for the Library for Performing Arts, so that the students who are in the public high schools across the street no longer feel like Lincoln Center is not welcoming to them. We want to get them into Lincoln Center and into LPA as well.
Yeah, that's great. I just want to see more in the outer boroughs. I know Manhattan gets prioritized, and the folks out here.
I get it.
Say that again.
No, I totally get it, which is why we're doing the 17 other locations and looking for outdoor space or creating outdoor space in the Bronx, Harlem, whatever.
Perfect.
Interesting to me, though, that even here in Midtown Manhattan, until we opened the Niarchos outdoor space, there was no public outdoor space for free in New York, even in the fancy neighborhoods, right? Though it isn't the fancy folks who are using our libraries, even here at the center in majority.
Talking from an outer borough over here next to Brooklyn, you know, like all the three systems, we really enjoy partnering with local street fairs, getting out there, especially in the summertime, whether it's setting up tables, whether it's bringing our big mobile units out to participate, to, you know, we don't just go and set up a table, we actually do programming while we're out there. You know, we don't believe in being passive per se. We believe if we're going to be somewhere, we're not just going to sit at a table. We're actually going to do things there. Parades that we like doing, whether we're the participants as staff to participate as a form of outreach or encouraging parades, and you know, giving out book distribution. And we also have, you know, plans, you know, as Tony said and Linda said, you know, increasing our footprint outside the physical walls of the library to make outdoor seating. That was something that we all learned that was a good thing to do, and we are all planning on those expansions.
Well, I'm really excited about that.
Sorry.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much to the libraries, and thank you, council members. I don't see any other hands raised. I'm just doing one last check.
Can I just say, because I made a mistake, Joy Bivens, who's amazing as the director of the Schomburg, is not the first woman director of the Schomburg. Jean Blackman, of course, was that until the 1980s, so I apologize.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for your time and attention. Really deeply appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your past and continued and future support.
Thank you all. Let's get this done.
All right, thank you so much to the libraries, and thank you everyone today. So this concludes the library's testimony and the administration or library's testimony portion of this hearing. So normally we would turn to public testimony. However, we do not have any registrations from the public today. So we will do one check now for anyone that we have missed, but this will otherwise conclude the end of all testimony in the testimony portion of this hearing. So if, for the record, if we have inadvertently missed anyone that has registered to testify today, if you have not been called, please use the Zoom raise hand function and you'll be called in the order that your hand has been raised. So we will wait one moment. We're not seeing any hands. So seeing none, just one moment, I'm just going to wait for people. Yep, and seeing none, I will now turn it back to Chair Osei for closing remarks. Chair?
Thank you so much, Brenda, and thank you to the representatives of our libraries who testified today. Brooklyn Public Library President Linda Johnson, New York Public Library President Tony Marks, and Queens Public Library Chief Librarian Nick Buren. New York Public Library Vice President Giselle Dixon, and Brooklyn Public Library Coordinator Kevin Kelly. I thank all of you for your service to our city and our communities, especially during COVID, and I thank you for your advocacy for the libraries today and beyond. I would like to thank my colleagues who joined us today for this important hearing today, As a chair of Cultural Affairs, Libraries, and International Intergroup Relations, it is important to me that our libraries are fully funded to ensure that there is enough staff and resources. It is important that our libraries continue to provide these services to our communities, especially our neighbors who need them most. Thank you for joining us today, and this hearing is now adjourned.